localwebradio.fm.
Welcome to This is Soccer with Chris Murphy, Executive Director from Coastal FC. Now, here's your host.
Hello, I am your host, Nick Jaworski, and I am here with Chris Murphy, the Executive Director of Coastal FC Soccer. And today we'll be talking with Chris about the debate over not keeping scores for U12 and younger teams in Canada. Now, before Chris joins us, just a reminder that if you have questions or require any assistance, you can always reach Chris through the website, www.coastalfc.ca. That's coastalfc.ca. Chris, it is great to be talking with you today.
Thanks, Nick.
All right, now, I'm really interested in this topic. This is sort of you hear about this on television shows and just around, and parenting culture about this issue of scorekeeping and competition and its place. And, I'm sure there are pros and cons for that. And I'm looking forward to hearing what you, the expert, have to say about it. And I guess we should just start. Where does this initiative come from?
Yeah, the Canadian Soccer Association over the last number of years, close to 10 years now, has been working on their long-term player development model. And within that, there's a big focus in shifting culture with respect to age appropriateness of training. And within that has come the idea of competition and keeping score. Mm-hmm. And so over the last, I would say, 2 years, the directive from CSA, Canadian Soccer Association, has been that leagues and tournaments are no longer permitted to keep and track scores or publish scores, and that's a nationwide initiative.
Now, what's the philosophy behind that age? Of course, they're going to compete later. What are they saying is the philosophy?
Yeah, I think that it's not about eliminating competition, and a lot of this comes down to, unfortunately, adult influence on the kids' experience. The young players, they have a short window of memory. They tend to see what's in front of them and what's immediately behind them, and they remember their experiences more than results. And what's tending to happen is that the results are a reminder for players, whether they win by lots or lose by lots. And so what happens is you kind of create a net neutral experience in that the players that are doing really well and winning by margins are having a great time, but the ones that are not are getting a constant reminder that they're not meeting the competition. And so typically what you see, and I see it at Coastal, is that those players who are on teams who maybe don't win as much or are told they don't win as much, they simply don't re-register as frequently as those who do. And so I think, again, it's important to differentiate that this is in no way, shape, or form to eliminate the competitive nature of sport or to, I hear oftentimes, to coddle children and not let them experience winning and losing and learning how to be good sportsmen, or to demonstrate good sportsmanship and to learn those skills early on in life. It's not a replacement for that, but it's more so just a reminder and a focus on what the game should be about, which is coaching to develop the players and to give the players the best chance for success. And I'll give you an example recently, and it was quite highly debated. We ran our big annual tournament, the Umbro Challenge Cup, and we, of course, were compliant, and we didn't keep scores. And it was our biggest year ever. We had about 100 teams that were U12 and younger. Wow. And so there was no negative impact from a participation standpoint, and the feedback on site was very good. But yet when people debate this and talk about it, they seem to have it in their mind in some cases that the results are a really important part of the kids' development. And I just think it's a miss, frankly. I think it's another example of a requirement for us to educate and to inform and to hopefully change the culture of the game to make sure that it really is about the kids and the players and their experience in the game at an age-appropriate time and level of play.
Yeah, and so when you think about the parents who are at the tournament or just in general, what are some of the more maybe even compelling, the arguments that they may give you that you have to really think about and respond to? What are the most compelling things that opponents to this plan might say?
Yeah, there's some good points, and intuitively they seem to make sense. And I wouldn't even suggest that I don't share some of them or didn't share some of them. And
Right.
frankly, it's been an adoption and education process for me as well. And my biggest teachers of this philosophy are actually the kids themselves, going and asking them about their experience and what they remember and how they see themselves. And that includes talking to the guys who are winning and the girls who are losing and all the different sort of stakeholders in the game. The big points I think that people would say is that it takes away the purpose. The game is competitive by nature. Life is competitive by nature.
Right.
And that, we're now basically saying that there's no winners and losers in games or in life, and that everybody's treated the same and it's all good for everybody. And I'd say the single biggest argument is that people are saying that the sport isn't preparing kids for what's eventually going to be the reality for them as they grow up. Right. And
right.
So again, it does make sense, but then when you look at kids and their sort of psychological and physical developmental phases, I think there's a time and a place for everything. And I really do think that, while you can't use a cookie cutter approach, I do think that, the CSA and the provinces and the clubs that are adopting this should stick with it, and they should continue to fight the fight and to educate people.
All right, now we have to take a quick break, but we'll be right back with Chris Murphy, the Executive Director of Coastal FC Soccer. We'll be talking more about this topic of competition at younger ages and how Coastal FC has handled it. So don't go anywhere. We will be right back.
More This is Soccer after a word from our sponsors. If you've been known to enjoy a nice glass of wine, be sure to tune in to From the Vine to the Wine with Matt Berzovich on the Lifestyle Channel on localwebradio.fm.
Hillcrest Bakery and Deli presents Old Time Radio on the Specialty Channel on localwebradio.fm.
Would you like to get more from the devices you own? Not quite sure where to start? There is help. Catch Powering Up for Non-Techies with Justin Martell, Computer Department Manager at London Drugs, on the Specialty Channel on localwebradio.fm.
It's time now for more This is Soccer with Chris Murphy for Coastal FC.
All right, we are back with Chris Murphy, and we're discussing Canadian soccer clubs. And obviously, Chris, you mentioned that this has been a re-education for yourself, and you've come around to this way of thinking, which is fantastic. And what has Coastal done to implement this change?
Well, on the basic level, we're obviously following the guidance of the Canadian Soccer Association by simply not keeping or posting scores. But to take that one step further, we're trying to actually create an environment which fosters competition, but also allows players to experience both sides of that. And what we've seen historically is that, you get the keen coach and dad or mom who assembles players, and maybe they coach them and develop them really well, or they attract better players, and their team is kind of like the dynasty team, if you will. And then you get the other coach who gets all the new kids and, is just out there for the fun of it, but in the end tends to lose more than they win and lose by large margins to the dynasty teams. And so those players, they don't get to experience the other side. And oftentimes, like I was saying earlier, we don't keep them in the game, and we don't give them a chance to be successful because their short-term experience and their initial experience is so negative. So we're spending a lot of energies working on the younger players and teams and coaches to, again, I think it starts with the education of the coaches, and we hope that spills through to the parents. And what we're really trying to do is work within an age group and get the coaches to cooperate on the construction of the teams at the beginning of any season, so that they understand that their input is important, so that our end goal is to try and create competitive balance and to make sure that that teams have, ideally the same number of players that are of a similar ability, so that when they play each other, they experience the idea of winning and losing, but never does the score, or seldom does the score, get out of hand where, kids leave the field feeling that it was just, they had no chance to be successful. So that's a big one for us. and it takes time, but I think that, I'm very happy with the lion's share. The majority of our coaches have really, I believe, gotten behind it, and it was actually, in fact, an easier sell than I thought it was going to be.
Now, just real quick, does this roster construction, does this also, this idea about participation and feeling the successes and maybe the disappointments, that also factor into who gets to play on the field and how often they play?
Well, I think, again, what you used to see where there was more emphasis on the results, and this is what I think your average person who doesn't maybe see the implementation of games, if you will, who carries the thought that, that competition is an important part of this and that the results are a factor in that and so on and so forth. What they don't see is that the coaches tend to coach based on what the motivating factors are. And if score line and results and tournament play, sometimes you'll see that there's all kinds of math formulas about goals for and against and so on and so forth. What that does is it changes the coach's motivation. And it almost forces them into the mindset that if I don't win, or if I don't win by this much, there might be a negative impact on me as the coach or my team as a whole. And so what that means is that they'll tend to play to win and play to score more than they'll play to develop.
Right.
And so they'll put the big strong kid at the back so that nobody can get by him, and they'll put the really fast girl at the front so that she can run all day and try and score some goals. And the newer players or the perceived weaker players won't play as much because they don't offer the same chance for team success. Kids that are coached to not take risks because they might make a mistake, which might negatively impact the team. So it really takes away from the player first mentality and puts the emphasis back on the team's results.
Right.
And so I think what happens here is that the motivation changes, or at least the motivation for winning is no longer there because it's not really remembered beyond the final handshake of any given day. And so coaches who buy into this are able to say, you know what, we're going to move players around, and we're going to allow the players that are new to the game or maybe are just kind of finding their way a little bit. We're going to give them and encourage them to take that risk and to try stuff that they've worked on in training without fear that it's going to hurt the team, and without them needing to feel bad that maybe the game went the wrong way by something that they did when they're just trying to learn and have fun.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's great. I think that transitions to our last question is what are the long-term expected outcomes of this initiative? Well,
again, going back to the opponents of this philosophy, the opponents will say that in order to build better teams at the national level and the professional level, that we need to create better competitors. We need to teach that younger. We need to, drive the kids more from an earlier age. And I would say this, that as a community club, our goal is to produce players for the next level of play, for sure. But the probability and the number of players that actually moves outside of community soccer and into, represent their province or the national team or the professional team or go on to college and university, that number is very low. And so the argument I would say is that the opportunity here for the club is that we're going to keep more kids playing the game. They're going to play longer. They're going to have fun, which means that the initiative to come to the park and put the boots on and to get out there with their teammates and their friends is theirs, not their parents or their coaches, because they're enjoying their experience. Consequently, the outcome should be that more kids playing and more kids playing longer and more kids loving the sport means that they're developing at the same time. And if you develop, you're going to create better players technically and tactically. And at that right age and time, we can then layer in competition and the importance of winning and results. And so I think this is a real win-win, and again, from a community club standpoint, our job is to service all players and to make sure that kids experience the game and live a healthy and fit lifestyle. And, so our emphasis, while everybody likes to win and everybody likes trophies and everybody likes the results aspects, it shouldn't take as much energy and focus at the community level. We can certainly leave that for the Vancouver Whitecaps and the Canadian national team. That's their job.
Right.
Our job is to get kids playing and to keep them playing and to keep them playing more so with a smile on their face.
Well, that's a great place for us to stop. And I thank you for sharing the insight. And next episode, we'll be talking about the player pathways and opportunities to continue in soccer after graduation. So that's a nice segue. And if you know someone who would benefit from what we've talked about today, youth soccer, competition, all those things, please go ahead and share this podcast with them. If you enjoyed the show, you can also share us with your friends on Facebook at facebook.com/coastalfc.ca, or you can follow them on Twitter using hashtag @coastal_FC, or always online on the web, www.coastalfc.ca. Chris, thanks so much.
Thanks for having me.
You've been listening to This is Soccer with Chris Murphy, Executive Director from Coastal FC, on the community channel on localwebradio.fm.
On your computer, on your smartphone, on your Wi-Fi radio, we're localwebradio.fm.
This episode is a production of Jam Media. For information on hosting your own web radio show, visit jammedia.com. That's www.jambmedia.com.
The opinions expressed by our guest and host on localwebradio.fm do not necessarily reflect the views of Jam Media or its owners. No expressed or implied opinions of any product or service should be considered an endorsement or recommendation of any kind by Jam Media or its owners.